the world stands still. A voice that once echoed across continents has fallen silent. In Vatican City, the bells toll. The legacy of a revolutionary pope, a spiritual father to over 1 billion souls, has come to a close. Today we remember the life, the controversies, and the global impact of Pope Francis, the people's pope. It was early morning in Rome. Clouds hung heavy over St. Peter's Basilica. And then, a statement from the Holy See confirmed what millions feared. Pope Francis, the 266th Pope of the Roman Catholic Church, had passed away at the age of 88 years old. The news rippled across the globe. From the streets of Buenos Aires to the steps of the Vatican, people gathered. Some wept. Others prayed. World leaders sent condolences. Religious figures from all faiths paid tribute. This wasn't just the death of a pope. It was the end of a spiritual chapter that reshaped Catholicism in the modern age. Born Jorge Mario Bergoglio in Argentina, Pope Francis was never a traditional cardinal. And as pope, he broke nearly every mold. From refusing the luxurious papal apartment to washing the feet of prisoners on Holy Thursday, his actions weren't just symbolic, they were seismic. He was the first Jesuit pope, the first pope from the Americas, and the first to take the name Francis, in honor of Saint Francis of Assisi, the patron of the poor and the environment. These choices weren't random. They defined his papacy. He challenged world leaders on climate change. He criticized economic inequality. He called for compassion toward migrants and spoke openly about LGBTQ+ inclusion, sparking fierce debate within the church. To many, he was a beacon of hope. To others, a disruptor. But no one could ignore him. But Pope Francis's reign was not without controversy. His attempts to modernize the church drew fire from conservative factions. His more tolerant tone on issues like same-sex relationships, divorced Catholics, and interfaith dialogue unsettled traditionalists. In 2018, the Pope faced mounting criticism over the Church's handling of clerical sexual abuse. While he took unprecedented steps to address the crisis, holding global summits and enforcing new policies, survivors and advocates argued it wasn't enough. Through it all, Francis remained firm, often saying, "The Church is not a museum of saints, but a hospital for sinners." Despite the storms, Pope Francis redefined what it meant to lead in the 21st century. His social media presence reached millions. His encyclicals tackled global issues like ecology, capitalism, and digital ethics. He was a spiritual diplomat, meeting leaders from China, Iran, and Russia. In 2021, he became the first pope to visit Iraq, delivering a message of peace from a war-torn land. He canonized Oscar Romero. He supported indigenous rights. He elevated women to senior Vatican roles never before open to them. And above all, he never stopped preaching mercy. Whether you were Catholic or not, Pope Francis was a figure impossible to ignore. In his final years, Pope Francis battled health complications, including severe knee pain and surgery. He often joked about his own mortality, saying, "I might be gone soon, pray for me." But he continued to work. Even in a wheelchair, he led synods, made diplomatic trips, and urged the Church to embrace change. In his final address, he said, "Let us not be afraid to live with joy. Let us not be afraid of tenderness. Let us not be afraid of the future, because God walks with us." As the world mourns, the Vatican now enters a solemn period called Sede Vacante. The seat is vacant. The College of Cardinals will soon gather in a secret conclave, voting to elect the next leader of the world's 1.3 billion Catholics. But no matter who succeeds him, the papacy of Francis will cast a long shadow, a legacy of compassion, controversy, and courage. In a world divided by politics and pain, Pope Francis reminded us of the simple power of humility. He was not perfect, but he was real. A shepherd who chose the smell of his sheep over the polish of power. Rest in peace, Papa Francesco. The world was listening. As the final prayers echoed across St. Peter's Square, and the incense drifted into the heavens, the procession began. The body of Pope Francis, the shepherd of souls, the servant of servants, was prepared for burial. What followed was a ceremony drawn from centuries of Catholic tradition, yet touched with the unmistakable simplicity that marked his papacy. From the steps of the Basilica, the coffin was carried into the heart of the Vatican, to the sacred grottos beneath the church. This labyrinth of marble and relics is home to the tombs of 91 popes, buried beneath the very foundation of the church. But Pope Francis had made a simple request, to rest not in grandeur but in humility. His tomb was prepared in a small chamber, once occupied by Pope Benedict XV, near the bones of St. Peter, the apostle he succeeded by spirit. In that quiet, hallowed space, the final moments were not for the cameras. Only a handful of cardinals and close aides were present. The final prayers were whispered, the ancient litany of the saints, the commendation to God, the closing of the tomb. A white linen cloth was laid over the cypress coffin. A gold seal from the fisherman's ring, broken upon his death, was placed beside it, now symbolic of the end of his earthly reign. Then the tomb was sealed. There were no trumpets, no royal fanfare, just silence and prayer. Within hours, the Vatican opened the tomb to the faithful. A line wrapped around the Basilica. Pilgrims, young and old, many in tears, knelt before the grave of the Pope who had once washed the feet of refugees, who smiled through pain, who dared to challenge the world with kindness. There was no gold statue, no towering monument. Just a stone and a name, Francis, written in the language of eternity. Among the items buried with him, one came as a surprise, a handwritten letter, his spiritual testament. In it, he expressed gratitude to the Church, to his family, and to the poor, the ones closest to the heart of Christ. Love without borders. Preach with your life. And never forget the wounded. That is where Christ hides. He ended with a plea, for unity, for mercy, and for the Church to walk forward, not in fear but in faith. And so, Pope Francis returned to the dust, not as a prince of power, not as a relic of Rome, but as a servant, laid to rest beneath the basilica he once called home. For centuries to come, pilgrims will pass by his tomb. Children will ask who he was. And somewhere, in whispered prayers and simple acts of love, his legacy will live on. Pope Francis, the last shall be first. With Pope Francis now laid to rest, a sacred transition begins. The Church enters a time known as seat vacant, Latin for, the seat is vacant. There is no pope, no signature ring, no voice to lead the faithful. But behind the ancient walls of the Vatican, the wheels of centuries-old tradition begin to turn. The world watches, and the Church prepares to choose the next Bishop of Rome. The responsibility now falls on the College of Cardinals, the senior-most clergy of the Catholic Church. Only those under the age of 80 may vote. In total, there are, insert number, eligible cardinals from every continent, every corner of the Catholic world. They gather in Rome, greeted not with ceremony but with silence. Their task is monumental, to discern through prayer and deliberation the next vicar of Christ. Before the vote begins, the cardinals meet in what are known as general congregations, closed-door sessions where they reflect on the state of the Church, the needs of the faithful, and the qualities required of the next pope. They speak, they listen, and above all they pray, for wisdom, for courage, for divine guidance. Then comes the most solemn moment, the conclave. From the Latin conclave, with a key. On the morning of the vote, the cardinals process into the Sistine Chapel, beneath the thunderous beauty of Michelangelo's Last Judgment. A final prayer is chanted. Then the doors are closed, locked from the inside. No phones. No communication with the outside world. Only the Holy Spirit and the men who have gathered to listen. They take an oath of secrecy. And then, they vote. Each cardinal writes a name on a small rectangular ballot, folds it, and places it on a plate, which is then tipped into a chalice. After each vote, the ballots are burned in a special stove. Chemicals are added to produce either black smoke, indicating no decision, or white smoke, the ancient signal that a new pope has been chosen. Outside in St. Peter's Square, the world waits, eyes fixed on the chimney above the Sistine Chapel. A puff of smoke, a swirl of uncertainty, then clarity. When a two-thirds majority is reached, the man chosen is asked a single question. Do you accept your canonical election as Supreme Pontiff? If he says yes, he is immediately Pope. He chooses a name, one that will define his papacy. The cardinal protodeacon then steps onto the balcony and utters the words heard by billions. Annuncio vobis gaudium magnum, habemus papam. I announce to you a great joy, we have a pope. A new face, a new voice, a new chapter in the history of the church begins. He stands there, a servant robed in white, carrying the weight of tradition and the hope of renewal. As the bells ring out across Rome and across the world, one story ends, and another begins.